different priorities there too, and we just got to change things. We can't keep graduating kids who can't read.
I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll open it up to audience questions. I also wanted to ask about earmarked dollars. Now, these are dollars that are given to schools with very specific purposes. A prime example is a teacher leadership compensation program. It's a $150 million commitment.
I think that tells you that's a priority in our mind. Over the last 5 years, we've increased spending to K-12, $560 million. There's only 2 areas that have grown in the state over the last 10 years as a percent of the total pie. That's Medicaid and that's K-12 education. So we do need to focus on education. We have, but we have to make sure we're fiscally responsible at the same time, that we don't overcommit those dollars, so then we have to come back the following year and say, well, sorry, money didn't come in, so we're going to have to do across-the-board cuts, or we're not going to be able to meet our commitments. As I've talked to superintendents across the state, obviously they want as much money as possible. They want it set in a timely manner, but they want to make sure that we honor our commitments, because they don't want to have to go back and make cuts assuming they were going to get a certain amount of money and then it doesn't come in. So it's very important that we give as much as we possibly can, but do so in a fiscally responsible manner. Thank you.
Let's move to third grade retention. And for those who don't know, this is a controversial law. We're not going to be talking about whether or not third graders starting next year should be held back and repeat the grade if they're not on grade level by the end of third year, but whether or not there are resources, adequate resources to prepare students to be on grade level by the end of third grade, as well as there's a provision in that law that students may attend a summer reading program, a specially designed, highly intensive summer reading program that will hopefully catch them up, and if they enroll in that, they can move on to fourth grade. If we want to start with our House members this time, it's been said that policy without resources just doesn't work. Are we going to be ready for this law? It's estimated up to 8,000 kids in Iowa might not be ready and might be below grade level and be affected by this law.
Well, I guess I'll start
Sure.
maybe on this one. Reading is so important. It's fundamental to everything we do. So I think it's a great initiative. It puts the focus on the need to have every kid proficient by the end of the third grade, so they're not continuing to fall behind in their school in grade 4 all the way through graduation. And so I like the initiative, but it does have to be adequately funded. Nothing is successful if it's implemented correctly without adequate funding. So, and I've stated this before. We've allocated over $2 million for the assessments to make sure that we recognize those kids that have reading difficulties and get them into programs that they need to be in the intensive reading instruction area. We've allocated an additional $8 million over the last few years for reading intensive programs. What we're talking about on third grade retention is a summer program. That's one area that if a student is not proficient, they have the ability to go to a summer program and not be withheld, retained if they go through that program. But we have to make sure that there's summer programs that are functioning and adequately appropriated money to do that. The estimate that I have seen on the need for additional funding for the summer program ranged anywhere from $6.6 to $9 million. We need to, as a legislature, find a way of funding that. And if it cannot be funded appropriately in a timely manner, I do not have a problem delaying implementation of the law, because again, we need to make sure that every school district has the resources they need to be successful, for the kids to be successful, so they're not retained just because we didn't have the programs to help them out. Thank you.
And I should add that the governor did not include in his budget money to fund the summer programs. He has raised money through private donations to do pilots, but that is a question as far as going forward. Representative Orth, would you like to to take this one?
Sure, indeed I would. You know, first I want to point out to you that in the last 5 years, school supplemental aid, or what we do as allowable growth, over the last 5 years has been the lowest percentage-wise 5 years of school supplemental aid ever in the history of public education in Iowa. In the last 5 years, it's been slashed down to next to nothing. Now, the argument is often made, well, commodity prices are low right now. Corn prices are low, and you know, beans are low, and that kind of thing. Well, I'll tell you what. The average corn price today, and I was checking the markets, price of corn, $3.56. In 2012, just 4 years ago, the average price of corn per bushel was $6.67, almost twice what it is today. And they didn't even set allowable growth. It went back to 0% when commodity prices were very, very high. So this whole commodity price thing rings very hollow to me. The economy is doing well. Fuel prices are low. All kinds of good things are happening. We're at 4% unemployment. These arguments just don't work for me. And so I'll tell you, when it comes to your question about third graders and reading and testing and standards, as long as school districts like Southeast Warren and Indianola and Carlisle and Martinsdale St. Mary's are having to endure class sizes that are now almost double what they used to be, and as long as we're having to cut teachers and reduce teacher staff and administration and staff at the schools, I don't see how in a world like that we can expect the average first grader and second grader to get the kinds of advantages that we in Iowans have a history of providing. It's a matter of priorities. It's a matter of setting priorities with the resources we have. Years ago, Iowa has never been a Hollywood state. We've always been a hard-scrabble state, but we've always made education number one, and we're failing to do that right now for some reason.
Well, let me go back and talk more about this third grade so-called retention. The term retention actually is misleading. It originated with the governor's initial proposal back in 2012. His proposal was to flunk every third grader who couldn't pass a state-mandated test. Well, when we looked into that and we consulted with the education experts, what we found was that retaining in grade was not a very effective strategy. Indeed, it's often counterproductive. So what we said was, well, we're not going to have the intervention be retention. We're going to suggest that kids go to summer school. And if a kid who isn't reading at grade level at the end of third grade, if they go to summer school and complete that program, then they will go on to fourth grade unless they're retained for other reasons, okay? And that's true whether or not they're actually back up to grade level. So it's an intensive summer program. The overall message was reading up at grade level at the end of third grade is critically important. I've heard from a lot of educators the phrase, up until third grade is learning to read. After third grade, it's reading to learn. In other words, after third grade, it's a tool you use to learn everything else. If you're not reading at grade level at that point, then you're going to be falling behind in everything else. Part of our approach to it also was to say, hey, why wait till third grade? So what we mandated in that bill, and it passed with broad bipartisan support, was that reading skills would be assessed for kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And instead of waiting until after third grade, when the governor proposed to provide a whole portfolio of additional assistance, we said, let's make that assistance available from the beginning. As soon as we discover that a kid is falling behind, let's get on it and get them back up to speed. We've been putting $8 million a year into that program, and I think that we are showing at least some results. I don't think it's enough money. The Senate Education Committee, I got 10 seconds, the Senate Education Committee has had 3 major sessions investigating various aspects of this program. We're doing this a year ahead of the implementation to try to make sure that we are on track. I don't think we're quite on track, but we're trying to move people ahead, and I hope we meet that goal. The goal is for every kid to be reading at grade level at third grade, and for every kid to have their summer free.
I'm going to comment on the third grade situation too, but I want to give you a number in light of the conversation we've heard here so far about how education funding has been slashed. The last 5 years, education funding has been increased by $300 million. And that doesn't even count the leadership or the mentoring program, which is another $100 million. So it's not like education has been starved. Obviously, everybody wants more than what they're getting, but it's a real challenge to fund education and everything else and stay within the amount of money that we've got. If we continually spend down our surplus, what do we do when it's gone? Then we're spending up here and our revenues are down here. We make up the difference with the surplus. But when you do that, that surplus, it's gone then. You don't have it for the next year. So you got to be very careful. And that was what was done years ago, and my handout kind of illustrates that. $300 million increased funding for education plus the mentoring program, third grade reading. The reason that we did that, we heard from colleges, employers, saying kids are graduating from high school. They can't read. We have to give them remedial reading. And that is not acceptable. So in the education reform that we passed, we set up this program that kids should be able to read by third grade. Everybody's known that that was coming, and it would seem to me that that should be a priority. What bigger priority is there for young kids to teach them how to read? So I just think that there need to be some different priorities there too, and we just got to change things. We can't keep graduating kids that can't read.